The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Deep right, we got tanks up there. Let's follow a range on deep right. I'm right on the target right now. I've got a couple right in front of me. I'm going after it.
Welcome back to the Lead Pursuit Podcast. Tonight, we're going to take on a controversial topic, and we're going to beat that horse until it's dead. And we brought a star-studded lineup to talk about it. So first, I want to introduce Steve, the man in the Great White North, who it's probably still 5 degrees.
It's lovely up here.
You're
we love
lying.
Pennsylvania. It's
Has
great.
The snow even started to melt yet? I have
Actually,
no
it
snow
did
left on
because
my
we
yard.
got like 17 inches of rain today. So now it's just flooding.
Awesome.
So we're good. It's
Congratulations. We'll join us in Alabama. We have the same problem. Brett, I think the weather dropped to what, 65 degrees in Jacksonville this last week?
It's freaking hot here right now. I don't know. It's 70 something. I don't know. I was out of town when it was much cooler and it was raining where I was. I came back and I'm like, dang, we should be, I guess I need to mow the grass maybe.
Yeah, that's not what you're supposed to be doing in the middle of January. But, my fellow Alabamian there who endured the harsh, cold temperatures, the single digits of Alabama. Matt, it's good to have you on. How you doing, brother?
Man, I have discovered a new hell. It's a week spent with a 2-year-old and no ability to take her outside.
Good for you. I'm glad you endured that because I was enduring the hell. It was miserable where I was. It was 95 degrees and it was raining in the afternoon, but it was dry in the mornings and the beer was cold. It was terrible in Malaysia, so I missed all that weather. No sympathy, I guess. But you know what? We couldn't hit rock bottom without bringing some of our best friends on for this topic. So we're joined by Tom Castanos from the Anything But a One Adventures in Miniature Wargaming. There's a mouthful of a podcast name. Tom, how you doing tonight?
Home of the deep dish pan pizza. Yes, thank you for having me.
Exactly. How are things there in the lovely state of Texas? Hopefully warmer than here in frickin' Alabama.
Mid-60s today, but at least the sun came out. It had been raining for several days, but yeah, not bad.
Yeah, no, we're in the middle of the rain. We're about to wash away. I think I'll have to paddle to meet Matt for lunch tomorrow. So, well, thanks for joining us. Really glad to have you on. Always good to pair up our podcast because we tend to have the same dark and sarcastic humor. And
No, no. No, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, what do we have coming up on the schedule for the Lead Pursuit podcast cast of characters? All right. Siege of Vicksburg. All right. 17 to 19 February, going over a lot of days there. There is the third annual Steve Toth Memorial Blood Red Skies tournament. So we'll be doing that. There'll be a lot of other events going on, lots of cool things. The link is going to be in the show notes, and then we'll also put it out on the website for people to go sign up for the tournament and all the other fun things that are on. Obviously, Adepticon 2024, the 20th to 24th of March. All of us are going to be there, well, except for Matt and Casey. Nice work, guys. Jeez, I see how it is, but that's all right. We're going to do Blood Red Skies. The schedule is out. It's on the Adepticon website. Lots of different events. We're going to do the Furball, the tournament, some jet stuff, Big Red Skies with Korea. I think John Russell's doing Big Red Skies, Chain Home, and Battle of Britain. And then we'll obviously do Aeronautica Imperialis, have that big non-tournament narrative event. That should be a lot of fun. And we'll even have Chris doing a painting small miniatures with an airbrush class. He'll have 2 of those. So I think those are actually sold out. But in case somebody drops out, go ahead and get on the wait list for that. And we may have extra seats. Who knows how big and what the conference room setup will be. So if you want to paint small miniatures, little airplanes, little tanks, if you're really brave, little people with an airbrush, come talk to Chris about that and we'll have it all set up. It will be hands-on. So bring your airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush, we'll have some and compressors for you. But bring your stuff and we'll all get together and paint. All right. Historicon. I just cleared my schedule so that I could go back to the exciting Historicon that Steve got to experience last year. So we're going to do that. We're going to do some streaming. We're going to hopefully do some Blood Red Skies events. I know I didn't get to play last year. Didn't get to link up with everybody, but we'll work our way through the schedule this year and we'll do some more Historicon. And that'll be 17 to 21 July, which means, sorry, John Russell, we will not be at Twisted Lords 2024. Insert sad pandas. So yeah, we made a choice. We decided to try Historicon. We've done Twisted Lords for the last few years. We just wanted to hit a different, wider variety of people. And then we may be back for Fall In. So we'll see how that goes. But that's the schedule. There'll obviously be other events that pop up, and we will pitch into those as they fit our schedule. Or Matt will not go to those events as it doesn't fit his schedule. But that's all right. No, Matt, I'm not bitter. Not bitter at all. Welcome to the podcast team.
You know, if I can find a babysitter,
that sounds like
that
your
might
problem,
help.
not mine. Well,
No, it is,
Brett's got a
totally.
babysitter right there. A cat. Leave your daughter with a cat. What could go wrong?
The cat would probably eat her.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk through a couple new things we've seen around the flight line. Steve, do you want to talk about this new Century fighter that Blue Falcon may be releasing here soon? Or
Oh man, I'm
so
psyched
super
for
secret?
this one. I'm psyched. I forgot how cool looking this plane was with the
Pointy
with
nose
those
and
intakes
big
and
wings
the
and
nose. Oh
intakes.
yeah, I'm excited for this one to keep punching out some of these Century series fighters, and this is going to be. I feel like this is really going to flesh out that Vietnam scenario.
Nice.
Rule set
Requirement,
for missile
yeah.
rules.
And as usual, Brett's cat is showing us its butt. When it's not biting Brett, it's obviously an orange cat. Nice. Brett, I'm so glad you have this cat in your life. It is exactly what you need.
Yes.
We all need it for the humor.
Pretty much as soon as I sit down in this chair, she comes from wherever she is and raises hell for about 5 minutes.
Yeah. That's why I closed the door to my office. My cats are outside annoying my wife right now. All right. There is another new miniature coming from Plane Printer. That's going to be another Lead Pursuit exclusive, another big wing bomber. I'm not going to say much about it, but it fits the theme of the other big wing bombers that we've had. No, Roger, it's not a B-36. I'm sorry. I was not willing to pay Roman to build me a B-36, but it's another big wing. So that should be coming out here shortly. Just saw the miniature today, and it looks awesome. All right. Anything anyone else has seen in the aerial wargaming world that's worth talking about on the show? Good. Nothing. Screw all those guys that have their own exclusive miniatures because we've got them too. That's all right. Okay, let's get on to the main topic. The topic tonight is house rules. And I probably should say the main topic is house rules, WTF ? Tom, you guys stirred the pot. So I got to blame you. This was not Lead Pursuit stirring the pot. You guys asked an innocent enough question about, speaking of Flames of War, what do y'all think of house rules? And how would you describe the response?
Divided, enthusiastic, bitter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say spirited, but bitter.
Yeah,
it
I'll go
probably
bitter.
matches the beer I'm drinking. It is a sour,
Oh, there you go.
much like some of the comments that were in there.
But you choose to drink that.
I do. That's true. Well, it fits my personality, as I will tell you. That's why I drink so many sours.
Yeah. Bitter old man.
So it was exactly. Bitter party of one. It was interesting to me. So, we talked offline, and I think this is always one of those interesting things to pick apart in gaming is why do people feel the way they do so passionately about an issue that I really don't give a fuck about. And I hate to say it that way, but it's one of those things that seems so natural to me. And then I find there's people that think I'm a heretic who needs to be burned at the stake for doing it. Brett, Steve, Matt, did any of you guys see this discussion? Matt, I would have figured you did based upon some of the people who were involved in it, that Facebook would have tagged you and drug you into it.
Yeah, it did. You're 100% right. And I think I actually commented on one of the posts, said we probably haven't played the same game of BRS twice because we're always fooling around with some rule, especially if we're playing Jets.
Yeah. And that's true, especially doing a lot of the Jet stuff. That was the definition of house rule. We got this crazy idea. Can we put hunters and gnats and MiGs and phantoms all together? Yeah. So,
oh my.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure we were definitely crossing the streams in some people's mind. But and Brett, Steve, did either of you guys see any of the churn on it?
I did, and I had like almost kind of like a introspective crisis reading these posts because I
You
find
suddenly
myself,
said, "Am I a bad person? Are
No,
we the
I find
baddies?"
myself, I read one post, and I'm like, yeah, fuck that guy, and then I read the guy who argued him, and I'm like, no, fuck that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
like,
I don't
that
know.
guy's a jerk. I
don't know. I don't know. I
Well,
could argue
and
both sides equally as passionately, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think Tom's probably gonna talk about it when his team chats about house rules. I was going that way literally through one of Sam Mustapha's posts. I'm like, yeah. Then he posted again. I'm like, yeah, screw you, Sam, you're wrong. So he actually hit both sides of the argument. So it was kind of funny to me just to read through there. But Brett, hopefully you missed the churn. Hopefully
somehow I was oblivious. Wow. I missed the whole thing. I don't know how I missed that.
Yeah, normally you get drug into the rest of the Grognard stupidity with this. But so I really wanted to kind of start with, I'll say the theory of why do people create house rules? And I think what we most often are used to is what we see on the interwebs, where it's jokingly in a mixture of all capitals, this game is broken, but I have to fix it, and that I think is the most vocal reason that there are house rules out there, whether or not that's the most valid reason. And we've seen it in Legion Imperialis now that's just been released. People are like, oh my God, this doesn't work. What do these rules mean? I'm going to change some of the stuff to make it make sense. And then you see people that are the opposite spectrum in that game. They're like, no, wait for all the expansions. When all the expansions come out, this rule will make sense. So it's kind of just funny to see the polarity there. And I'd say it's probably the most controversial because someone is attacking the very core mechanics of a game, and that's naturally going to put people into the fanboy or critic kind of categories. Tom, what do you think about that as kind of the starting point for where people make the house rules?
I think if it's a hierarchy, we start with chess, which is the perfectly balanced game. Everybody has the same number of pieces. The pieces all move the same way. I guess maybe if you're white or go first or second or whatever. But other than that, the game is as balanced as a game is going to be. From that point down, and the majority of most of our games, and you can talk about whether it's point-based or it's designed for, tournament play and all this kind of thing, there still are just little pieces that will not be the same. And as soon as that happens, somebody feels that their piece isn't as significant as player B's piece, right? And at that point, it just all starts to unravel,
I refer to that as the disadvantaged faction, which means you should have chosen a different one to paint. I'm sorry.
Well, I feel bad going to beat up on my co-host Ray, who's not here, but in Team Yankees, if you chose to play the Canadians, you get whatever the fuck happens to you at that point,
I don't know. Don't they get the ADATS missile? I seem to remember people like shooting across the board and killing tanks with an anti-aircraft missile.
He is the king of wanting to take factions that aren't even in the rules, right? And he digs around and finds some little thing. And on one hand, he'll say, well, I just like the challenge of these things. Then when he gets challenged to death, he's the rules are broken. Exactly. It's like, I don't think it works like that. But no, I mean, again, that's mean to speak of him when he can't defend himself here.
He'll defend himself soon.
Oh, he will. But I mean, I just think it's people that feel for whatever reason that they can't play fairly in a game, that the game is skewed and they need to jump in and add modifiers or add rules or subtract rules. Virtually every game has it.
Yeah. Matt, I know you've seen that in our weekly AI.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that Necrons being specifically very, very difficult to play against. And I mean, I was lucky last time we played to destroy one of their ships at the total loss of, I think, all my Xiphons and I think one of my Storm Eagles. So that's
you're suddenly like, I need to house rule those guys to be nerfed.
Now, I'm just going to say right now, being that I don't know those rules, it sounded like a commercial for a pharmaceutical just now. It's like,
it
I'm going to worry about like diarrhea and all the side effects.
Yeah. Games Workshop, the names they come up with that are either some bad amalgamation of Latin and something else, or but in our group, Matt, I'll make fun of him now because if he's listening, we're laughing at you, Shades. Our buddy Shades, who we refer to the rules as being shadesified because he is perfectly happy to go in and tweak things, and he wants to, and he derives a lot of enjoyment from that. Sometimes he tweaks it to his detriment. And he said, hey, let's, instead of hitting on a 5 and a 6, let's hit on a 4, 5, and a 6, not realizing he was at a dice disadvantage in some of these engagements. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to shoot you more times. That's fine. Not a big deal. I'll hit you more. But, the thing for him is he feels sometimes the game itself doesn't give an equal advantage to the other players. Brett, Steve, have you seen anything like that in at least things where either you house ruled stuff or in games recently?
I can't think of anything recently, but I was before we recorded, I was thinking about what kind of basic house rule things I'm thought of, and just thinking like just trying to play with Gavin, like some kind of like almost like an escalation league with some 40K models, like super basic scale down game where it's really easy to hit, really easy to wound. But I thought if we did get to something where we're doing points-based side, that whoever loses the game maybe gets a buff for the next game, so that if maybe you just need a handicap or whatever to make it fair, like it goes back and forth that way, instead of just like a pure escalation where it's okay, this time we're going to play 250 points, next time we're going to play 500 points, and be we start at some point value, and then whoever maybe loses gets 100 points or something.
And I think you bring up a point there that we'll come back to a few times through here, is that inherently some of the campaign systems that are out there, whether they're Games Workshop and the way that theirs are built, or Air Metals and Iron Crosses that you and Steve did for Blood Red Skies, those are inherently started as house rules because you said, I want to do something bigger than this one-shot game, and I have to make something that connects it, so I'm going to create house rules that impact those other one-shot games, but they're not part of the core rule system. And they're going to
let me jump in.
Let
me jump in there for just a second. I'm sorry, Steve. I think there's two separate categories, though. So on one, you're talking about I like making creative scenarios, and I will add a house rule by a scenario. In this particular instance, the Germans aren't going to show up, whatever, blah, 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 because it tells a part of that narrative. That's not manipulating the mechanic of the basic, like how you fire, how you move every turn of the game. So I see that as different. Adding a campaign system or whatever
can be made. The interesting thing for me is when a campaign system crosses into affecting the turn-by-turn play. And so some of these nerfs or buffs that start your deployment a little bit differently, or as we saw out in Texas when we did the combined Aeronautica Kill Team and 40K, when you have mid-game events that come up that really change some of the core interactions because the guy next to you won his Aeronautica game. And so then all of a sudden, all of your guys now hit on a 6 instead of a 5.
Right.
And I think there's you hit upon something there, that there's a difference to me in changing the behavior of a core mechanic versus changing the odds, versus changing the deployment, versus changing all these other things that to me aren't changing the game. I'll keep going back to some Hex Encounter games. If I change the CRT for a house rules, the combat results table and squad leader, that's not changing the core mechanic of the game. If I change how moving and firing works, the baseline, then to me that's a house rule that is of a different category.
I'll let somebody else speak.
Tom.
No, Matt, certainly.
Okay, Matt.
So I guess we didn't do the fundamental thing, like defining terms. When you say house rules, you're talking about the actual mechanics of the game, or because I started out before moving to BRS with Cruel Seas, which I wouldn't go so far as to call it broken, but the rule book was so poorly edited that, missing stats, missing things, that it required house rules to be playable, or you just had to come to a gentleman's agreement, handshake, say, hey, that 20 millimeter cannon, just replace that with, 250 cals or whatever it was actually supposed to be, based off of what the, errata that eventually came out. But prior to that, or if, in my case, didn't even realize there wasn't errata because I just took the rule book at face value. And we, when I played my buddy Aaron, we just say, just ignore that, or, we'll just call it this. And is that really a house rule, or is that just making up for what's that?
Well, I say, and yet there are people that play Cruel Seas as the rule book is written, which
I don't know how you do that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But that to me comes back to the point of people use a broad term for house rules, and when they don't define it, then they make statements from it that are, you are defeating the game designer's intent by using any house rule. Well, if we didn't define what a house rule is, how am I defeating the game designer's intent? Or my favorite one, which kind of comes back to my least favorite word that starts with a G, gatekeeping, is when designers say, who do you think you are changing the rules? Because I spend a lot of time playtesting this thing and it's very tightly wound. And I kind of laugh when people say that, because to me, that's a level of taking away somebody's agency that once they've bought the game, they should play the game how they enjoy it. But I think there's a bigger problem in defining it, that people want to lump things into house rules just to tell you not to do it. And we'll come back to that.
So this first category here, like this game is broken category, right? And I'm kind of all these, I'm like saying them tongue in cheek because I know there's going to be both sides, like reading that, they're going to be so offended by this, right? But this game is broken crowd to me is the I can't win argument.
Therefore, the game is broken.
So the game is broken. It's not just this game is broken and everybody thinks it's broken, or this game is broken and nobody has fun playing it. It's this game is broken, because I can never win. Yeah. So I need to house rule the game. Yeah. And I'm sure that's not the only thing, but that's what it seems like the majority of this
and sometimes it's like, this game is broken because I can't read the effing rules, or haven't read the rules, or am trying to play the game without, taking a detailed understanding of the rules, which does go back to the game designer comment where they're like, hey, just play the game. But there are times, like with Legion Imperialis, we come up to traits for some of the weapons and we're like, the rules don't even work that way. I can't use this weapon trait because the rules don't work that way. So what did you mean?
And I think this rule, and we're talking about house rules in a broad sense, but from the Blood Red Skies perspective, this one here to me is the critical dodge negates boom shit. Okay? It is the most idiotic, sociopathic, narcissistic rule to put into a game.
I'm being called out here.
And it is, but like the people that do this, the game is totally broken because I get boomed out too quickly. Well, yeah, if you fly around like an idiot and you burn advantage all the time and you get shot you fly yourself into positions, you get shot, you're probably going to lose a lot of games. But that's never happened to me. I've gotten my ass kicked a lot of times in Blood Red Skies, and I've never been like, oh man, it's because this game is broken and I got too many boom shits. It's just, I feel like it's a very lazy, convenient argument to make a house rule.
Well, and we'll come back to, we can talk about that house rule again here in a couple bullets, because I think it actually falls under two categories. People use it as it's broken, but it really isn't a broken thing. So let's skip ahead to the next one, which is one of the more common reasons to house rule, and I think one of the ones that has to be given the most leniency, is because it's fun. Someone just wants to change something to either streamline the game, make it more fun. As Brett said, hey, simplify it, maybe play it with your kid, and you're going to house rule that every time we play this game, we're going to roll 1 die instead of 16, just to speed things up. Or and I'm trying to think of a good Blood Red Skies example. I can't, because it seems like every house rule doesn't make it fun. Just makes it more painful. But to me, there is a category of doing things in a variety of games to make it more fun. But I don't think anybody at the end of the day is going to have heartburn with that. If you came and said, we're going to play Team Yankee this way because it's a lot more fun when we light our models on fire when they get killed. Then I think everybody would be like, sure, sounds good. Let me go borrow Scott Ashton's models because I don't have any.
No, they'll be mine.
Yeah, exactly.
But I sold Scott, but anyway.
Yeah.
No, that's a lie because you have my Soviets.
Yeah, that's true. I still have all your stuff. Oops.
But here's so I'll be the naysayer there.
Yeah,
I agree. But number one, that fun has to be unilateral.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
And number two, is that the gateway drug to moving on to changing the CRT, which I want to go fully back circle. You said changing the CRT is, it's like, I think that's a huge tweak of a rule when you start changing.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Oh, it is.
So
it absolutely is. But I think that goes under what I'll call successive approximation. So I'm going to be a nerd here. And Brett remembers this from his Ranger days. You can shoot a couple different kinds of artillery fire. You can shoot creeping fire and incrementally just add 50, and then hit the target. Or you can bracket the target and shoot long, shoot short, and hopefully eventually get the fire there. I think some of these rules are broken, like tweaking the CRT, tweaking the dice odds to hit. Those are creeping fire. You're like, something doesn't feel right, but I just want to change something and see if it works. And I think a lot of players, when they do those house rules, don't do them consistently. Those house rules don't stand the test of time because the game as a whole probably is balanced enough, but people either, like Steve said, were losing all the time, or something the odds didn't feel right. So let's just tweak the odds a little bit, see if it changes it. And more often than not, it does have second and third order consequences, kind of like you're alluding to, Tom. It absolutely does. But I think in some games, like I'll use Aeronautica as a great example. There are so many dice being chucked at some point that tweaking the odds a little bit in the end has a minor effect.
Right. Yeah, Flames of War too.
Yeah. That you could change the dice odds, but you're not dramatically changing things.
We need to have Tom on more often. Or like, Tom, are you looking for like a new member to your podcast? Because I'm just like,
Steve's gonna jump ship. Steve's like, screw this guy.
I feel like exactly what you said. Add fun for who? Right. So like the most egregious house rule of all games of all time is free parking in Monopoly. Free parking does not exist in the rules of Monopoly, but people just said, oh, we're going to take all these random things that the money's supposed to go to the bank, put it in the middle of the board. And then as soon as the game's actually about to end, somebody lands on that and it starts over.
And they bitch that the game takes forever.
Yeah, it's a 30-minute game that now takes 19 and a half hours and destroys families because somebody added a house rule.
I was deep into my 50s before I knew that you had to buy the first property the first time around that you landed. I mean, my family never played this way, but we also got into fistfights. So I mean,
well, but I think this also comes back to something you have to define is a house rule should not be unilaterally imposed by one person. A house rule is something you should discuss. A house rule is something that should be entered into like a marriage. You're going into this contract.
How many times have you been married, Doug? I got a few there.
Yeah, exactly. but you shouldn't just pop a house rule on your buddy and go, hey man, for this game, we're going to try this. What do you think? This should be one of those things where you're like, hey, next time we play, these last 3 games took way too long. Can we increase the amount of times that we hit in the next game we play? And to me, it has to be both sides agreeing to it, because otherwise it's one person probably tweaking it for their advantage or for their fun. I think playing against Necrons anytime in Aeronautica is them playing for their fun against my enjoyment, because I don't like it. Connor, we're talking about you. Rick, we're talking about your wife as well. Now there's 2 Necron players in our group.
There's 2 now?
Yeah, there's 2 now. She has her Necrons painted, so I can lose twice as much. This is awesome.
You remember when we were playing ACM? Fairly regularly. I felt like, not that was a super complete rule set. It was still very much beta, but I felt like we had to make a lot of modifications to that, or else we ended up flipping back through the rules a million times to see what that, and granted, maybe that's a different example, not really a house rule, but playing around with the beta. But we did the same thing with the BRS missile rules, where we tested those out a couple different ways until we decided on one that either felt right or was more fun.
And we'll come back to talk to that in playtesting, because there's a lie to playtesting, and there's a lot of polished, finished games out there that don't get that aren't, and it's not the designer's fault, but that just how gaming works. They are not playtested as much by the designer as by the community.
And then there's a revelation about Games Workshop where they weren't playtested at all.
No, they don't. That's what an errata's for, right?
Yeah.
You release rules, and people say they suck. You're like, oh, we'll fix that. You send out an errata,
And you may or may not.
40K. Yeah, or you may not, because you want people to buy the miniatures and win the tournaments for the first couple months. Okay, well, let's talk about one that's related to for fun. And I'll say house rules of this kind are just as contentious as it's broken in my mind. To add a thematic feel. So, like in the Blood Red Skies tournaments, we said, hey, we want the theater cards to be tied to the table. So whatever table you step to, whether it's the Pacific, Eastern Front, whatever, we're going to house rule that you have a limited selection of theater cards. So you can't be the Japanese and play radar support in the Pacific. It's just not going to work. Or as Brett brought up, the pilot skill buff by buff or nerf by nation in Air Medals and Iron Crosses. And like Tom said, campaign systems tend to be another bridge, but this literally, at least for the pilot skill, is changing the initial conditions of the game, and it changes a little bit about the points balance, because all of a sudden you've spent points, and now because I'm the British in 1941, I'm either rewarded or penalized for those points, and it changes the basic balance of what a pilot counts for. Brett, what were you guys thinking when you did some of the pilot skill tweaks besides do something thematic?
Yeah, I mean, that was the main thing, was just to maybe introduce it. We actually offered it up in the rule book as just as a suggestion. Hey, consider doing this. I think it was kind of the tone of the text on that, but it was just to give a little bit of flair to each of the factions so that they felt different. Like if you played in a campaign with a certain nationality, it sort of had some flair that was unique to it.
Yeah. Well, I like the way you say that, because once again, coming from Hex Encounter, in your own rule book, you said, hey, try this. And you didn't categorize it as a optional rule that causes this level of change to the game. You said, in a sense, play with this house rule. Because in my Hex Encounter background, there are many times I'd open up the back page of the rule book and the game designer would have a bunch of random notes and kind of house rule things that were in there that they would say, hey, should you want to simulate nuclear war, light the board on fire and walk away. Things like that while some were tongue in cheek, some were really like, here's what I thought about doing, but didn't really put into a formalized rule.
Well, I'll take the Grognard medal here. It's a fucking historical game. I mean, I'm sorry if your butt hurt that your Napoleonic Austrians suck, but they did. Right? If you choose to play the Italian army in World War II in 1944, you get what you get. And by the way,
right. What if the game doesn't take that into account? What if the game doesn't take historical, and for a historical reason you go, okay, we're going to house rule this, that as Brits in 1939 you can't take any AC.
then you suffer the possibility of being called a racist douchebag, right? All of a sudden, if you start saying these guys suck and these guys, I want to let someone else do that for me, right?
And maybe history. You've made that discussion before, which is pretty funny, about the nerfing of armies in games and the potential for that just to be unfair and biased and not historically.
But what you get in return is remarkable shit talking when you win with that horrible army. I mean, yes. you are just the king of, you can stomp on you in your face and you can pull out body part, you do anything you want to at that point, and no one can possibly argue with you because Jesus Christ, you won with the finish or whatever, It's
exactly. Oh, all right. Well, so let's move on to another one of the whys, and this we've done a lot in Aeronautica, is to adjust an economy in the game or to adjust a penalty in the game to make it to add more tactical options, I guess is the best way to describe it. We house ruled for a while when playing AI that you would lose more speed or gain more speed the further number of levels you would climb or dive. Because in the game, you just gain one speed or lose one speed regardless how much you climb or dive. And that was a fun house rule. And it was adjusting an economy, in a sense, the economy of what your speed was versus altitude. Did we play it every time? No. But it was, to me, it was a fun way to make the game or make people have to think about the tactical consequences of what they wanted to do.
There's a good chance Chris might actually think that's the rule.
Okay, so rule number 1 of playing with Chris is don't do house rules because you'll confuse him with real rules.
I mean, we rely on you to explain the rules to us. Since I met you, I've never actually had to read a rule book. Why is it my cross to bear? Yeah, exactly. Why is it my cross to bear? Tom, who in your group is the rule reader?
Oh,
is it you?
It's going to be Richard. He's the attorney of all of us, and again, he's the one that will die on the hill that you'd never change anything. Yes. And I'm kind of in the middle, and Ray's ready to, it's an open palette. He's the artist of the bunch that's like, well, that's not how I envisioned it. And it's like, well, I don't think they give a crap what you envisioned. It's written right here,
Yeah, it's written right here in black and white. There's at least try
There's definitely kind of a curve between our three, in that particular argument.
Yeah, that's definitely understandable. Well, and one of the things similar to that we talked about previously is house rules to try something new. So there are a variety of reasons to house rule force organizations or forces that aren't even in the game. Like if we brought orcs into Legion Imperialis, that would be a house rule to bring those in. They would have to have different traits. They'd have to have different force orgs, things like that. It'd be a heck of a lot of fun to watch them go crunch on Space Marines. But Brett, you guys gave bombers in Air Medals and Iron Crosses adjustable pilot skill. So that was kind of I get the feeling that was thrown out there to do something different, not necessarily thrown out to think what the second and third order consequences of
just to make, the odds are they're going to be pilot skill 3, just like in normal, gameplay. But we thought it just might sometimes throw a wrench in the thing, especially when you consider, it's multiple games over some period of time. Those little changes just makes the game sometimes feel quite a bit different, where maybe you're getting beat pretty bad pretty consistently, and then all of a sudden some little change like that is a ray of hope, right, for a single game that gets you.
Was that Steve's ray of hope that he always wanted the PS5 bomber that was at least going to make it to the target? Yeah, it's one of those tweaks to me that I think is I have a lot of mercy for it, but I also tell people that this is a rabbit hole you're going to go down, and you're going to try it once and you're going to play an entire game and go, that was terrible. But to me, it asks the question of, why are you playing the game? Are you playing the game for the end results? Or are you playing the game for the experience of playing the game and just having the fun? If you're playing the game to draw historical conclusions, then don't do things that just to try something new. But if it's the 17th Monday that you're playing Aeronautica Imperialis, absolutely, in my opinion, go out there, try something new, as long as everybody agrees. Kind of like we did this last time with some of the terrain that you could fly through. And we saw that house rule caused a little churn when people interpreted hexes a couple different ways. But at the same time, everybody didn't have a competitive hat on. They were looking at it very narrative, and everybody laughed as they had this mental image of this small, I'll say, Roadrunner and Coyote style desert arch that, 2 Necron fighters, a Thunderhawk, and a couple Thunderbolts fly through. So I think everybody enjoyed that one, where we made a rule just for the fun of it, but it wasn't something we were going to incorporate in every game.
Steve, remember we did a thing in Air Medals and Iron Crosses with the chance for even the lowest pilot skill guys to get a ace trait from a very small list of potential ace traits, but that's a pretty big deviation from the regular game, and it was just to spice things up, make it fun.
For sure. Yeah, and I think to try something new is a different type of house rule, in the respect that everybody who's playing knows what they're getting into, right? So I think of to try something new, right? bolt action Vietnam, right? So you're saying like, okay, this is a game that's everybody knows entering that game that it's not an official game, right? So this is a game that is a house rule that's based on bolt action, right? So I feel like that goes back to before where you're saying like, when you make these house rules, kind of like if everybody knows what they're getting into, it's a lot different flavor than if somebody's just kind of like, oh yeah, we're making this house rule. We're saying we're playing this game tonight,
right?
But it's this house rule, you know?
Yeah, and like I always say, never pop the house rule on people at the last instant.
Well, and there's two things. So one, Doug, you talked about playing AI, 17 times, 17 Mondays. That's key. Because, the thing that we struggle with all the time because of our weird schedules is sometimes we only get one game in maybe a month. And if it's going to be that, I don't want to futz around with, I want to play the damn game. There's that
Trust
side
me.
of it.
You've got to spice up your gaming life just like the bedroom.
You just don't even know what you've said there, but you're right. But now that
Matt is now seriously disturbed.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden I'm just going to get in a fetal position and sit in the back of the room for the rest of this episode. But you do. And I think even to smartly add your house rule, you have to know the base rules. You have to be very adept at understanding.
You're absolutely right. And part of it also is it's easier to make a tweak to a game you've been playing for 17 Mondays than to say, we're going to go pick up Silent Death or some other fighter-based space fighter game and start everybody learning it because we want something different. Sometimes it's easier to house rule to have something different, add a little spice to the game, and not jump systems. Because in our group, and I'll pick on Shades again, Shades loves playing a lot of different game systems. Shades would play a different game every Monday night. My brain just can't work that way. And even flipping between Aeronautica version 2.0, the current one, and Aeronautica 1.0, that even hurts my head as much as I like Aeronautica 1.0. But I think a lot of people, they want something different, but they know they don't want to go pick up a whole new game. Right.
And that's the advantage of stuff like the Warlord, battle games where they're all kind of work on a very similar but not exactly the same mechanic that you theoretically and it's just different enough to fuck your game up, by the way, typically. But the reality in that, or that flexibility. But let me add one thing about, and this brings back just the cold chills of Flames of War. I said something the last time we played, and I've been testing it as a theory, and I'm not sure I still believe it entirely. But one of the big complaints for the people that play Flames of War is the parking lots, the hub to hub Napoleonic tanks across the battlefield. And I sat and I looked at the rules.
Steve loves that.
Oh yeah, it's the favorite thing, right, Steve? and I look at it and I ask myself, what in these rules makes you do that? And you could argue it might be like the command radius of the troops or whatever. But the bottom line is, I don't think there's anything in those rules that make you do that. I think it's a mindset that people get in on that game. Because to me, a crossfire would be more advantageous if Richard says, oh yeah, but that's hard to line up. Well, but that's a part of, working on a battlefield. I looked and looked and looked. Yeah. So maybe the other way to look at that, the inverse, is what other set of rules where little things are rolling around and shooting at each other, do they line up? What's the advantage? What's the disadvantage? It appears to just be a psychological one. I don't think there's anything in those rules that makes you do that.
I think the only thing is cover. And I know a lot of people will do the perfect tank park because sure, you can plink my tank on the end, but now you have to get all the way around that edge of the board to do it. And they will.
Yeah, but they'll do it out in the open too. Big old line, the charge of the light brigade there with, Panzer IVs or whatever. But I don't want to go too far down a hole with that. But that's one of the things that people really talk about wanting to house rule. We're going to minimum distance between vehicles and this and that. It's like, well, just make better artillery and blow the hell out of them. But then you're going to tweak that.
Just use a smaller point value. use a smaller point value, and then all of a sudden you can't take that
Are
many.
you an American? I'm sorry.
Exactly.
I think Doug's Canadian. It's smaller
I
game.
must be. I don't like
game. What are you
I don't like
talking
big
about?
max, and I don't like big point values. Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
The book says the maximum game should be 250. That means we need a 1,000-point game. And that's literally the way that works. But all right.
So I think Doug and I have only played Flames of War together at least once. I don't know if you played any additional games with anyone
once
else.
was enough.
Well, when we played that game, the problem or the reason, like my Shermans, or I think I was playing Stuarts, you were playing, or I was playing Americans, you were playing Russians.
Yeah.
The reason for at least the Americans for the tank park was there's so damn many models. Just moving them, it became more efficient to just pick up a line of them and move them forward. So it was, to me, it was just a number of models per unit requirement. More so than, okay, it might be historical, but okay, so you have the number of models on the table. Suddenly you can move them around better.
I've said that for
That's
years.
my theory
And I think with most of the games, smaller is better.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it also goes to scale. I mean, it's one of those things I love. I love the big Flames of War miniatures, but the game probably plays better with 6 mil.
Absolutely.
It have 1/285. But anyway, well, hey, moving on back to the old days when house rules were not allowed, because that's kind of what everybody, all the grognards say. Back in the old days, we didn't house rule. So I'm looking at the General Magazine episode. Let's see, was volume 16, number 3. Somewhere I have a year here in this one. Who knows? 1970 something, because I was a kid. But, the General Magazine, Avalon Hill. I mean, Avalon Hill, the pinnacle of games that have been play tested, and no one is going to change these things. And yet, you open up their own magazine, and there are articles on house rules. And why are the house rules there? Well, because we found some things are kind of a little complex, like under advanced level midway. And I got to read the quote because it's funny to me. It says, playing time is short. The rules are fairly simple and there's plenty of action. Yet there are a few rules which seriously detract from the potential realism of the game. A discussion of each follows along with a proposed change to correct, enhance, an otherwise fine game. Mic drop. So, and I'll use that one. I'll also use the Dragon magazine for Dungeons and Dragons. Holy crap. I couldn't open an issue of the Dragon magazine without freaking Gary Gygax himself saying, hey, but if you want to change up the classes and have a fighter also be a mage and do all this other crazy stuff.
Well, isn't that every Rick Priestley rule ends with it's your game, do whatever you want to?
Yeah, exactly. So that would be, any of Rick's games like Rogue Trader or anything, you just take it and change it and go with it. And I laugh at some of these corporate mouthpiece magazines, Dragon and General and some of the other ones were literally collection of house rules. Now they had other things. They had reviews. They had, battle reports. They had the standard things we now see on YouTube, but they also did have a lot of house rules where like, some guys have played some different rules to it and this kind of works. We saw it at a convention and wanted to share this. So I throw that out to the grognards that say we didn't used to have house rules. You're wrong.
Oh, even GW had Fanatic Magazine, which was a collection of house rules for basically untested miniatures or untested scenarios, and they huge disclaimers like, we've not extensively tried this, but it sounds cool. Let us know what you think. Right back in, because that was predating general use of email.
When you had to write in.
Yeah, that's right. Here's a self-addressed stamped envelope.
I'm laughing opening the copy of the General, and of course, first of all, it talks about play-by-mail games. Then it talks about that revolution coming in the future, play-by-email games. And then, of course, it says, send your self-addressed stamped envelope for a Avalon Hill catalog. Yeah, all those things that I'm like, my God, am I that old? Yes, I am that old. All right, well, let's talk through a couple of the, as I call them, the case against house rules real quick. We knew this was going to be a long show, but there's a couple things we want to cover because I think they're points that we've hit on, but we need to make clear that these are some of the arguments. As Tom and I both talked about with messing with CRTs and things like that, people will say, you aren't the designer, you're fooling with the game balance itself. And I think that's an important point to address in what kind of house rule you're playing with, because you may not be affecting game balance, and we shouldn't lump all house rules together. You may literally be taking an initial or secondary interaction, and it may not be a recurring mechanic. It may not be, I am changing how every unit in the game fires. I might just be making a small tweak to how one side or the other deploys. Is this Germany 1985? I want everybody to be in the barracks, not on the front lines. Things like that. But guys, do you tend to think that most of the arguments against get lumped into that category, or is there some other category of arguments against house rules that you see kind of takes the primary argument?
I think an argument that's kind of missing there is almost an argument from the other side, where we said that like the game is broken and I can't win, where there are people whose literal interpretation of the rule is the crutch they use to win.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So then it's almost kind of like, I win because I can play specifically by the rules. So right. Even if the game is
not open to any house
and
rules.
I'm not open to any house rules, right? And I feel like that's kind of almost the exact inverse of that person who complains that it's broken.
Yeah.
That this person found a game that is so perfectly written for their, play style that they grasp to it and say no house rules.
It's called Hitler's buzzsaw, Steve, and I'm feeling judged right now.
But it's
that's true.
But is this not the kryptonite of the rules lawyer?
Oh yeah,
the guy that's memorized every page of the written rule as it is. This just takes them into. I mean, again, and a little bit of Richard
takes away their
a little bit of Richard because he's that hyper analytical, technical reader that knows and has thought of. Not only I've read the rules, I've thought of every conceivable combination of how that plays, and I applaud. People that are that smart, because I have multiple liberal arts degrees that didn't require that kind of problem solving.
But I think there's an outgrowth of that as well, which is if a game needs house rules, therefore it sucks and I'm not going to play it. And that's what I refer to as the perfect playtesting fallacy, because coming from a background in software engineering for aircraft and flight testing, I'll take the idea that we used to realize that there's all this test you can do with the airplane on a range, controlled conditions, but literally a bunch of knucklehead Marines flying that airplane across 12 squadrons is going to do more flight testing in the first month than you've done in the entire couple of years.
Well, somebody tested that 737 door, right?
Yeah, exactly. Somebody tested to make sure we knew exactly what the torque settings were. But you think about it, if you had a game designer and even a team of 10 gamers that played a game for a year, then when you sell 2,000 copies, when those gamers crack it open for the first 2 or 3 plays, they've already done a whole order of magnitude more playtesting than you have. And you're going to find things. And I think you shouldn't judge a game on it sucks if it isn't perfectly balanced, if it isn't perfectly tight. I think people will always find some loophole. It's the whole rules as written versus rules as intended. And people are going to want to play a game rules as written if it advantages their way of thinking, or they're going to want to be rules as intended and kind of make a tweak in there if it advantages their play. Yes, Matt, you look pensive.
Well, I'd also say there's that I saw this on the Facebook discussion of, and I'm not saying I agree with it because I don't, are you really playing that game if you've changed the rules? I guess it's the ship of Theseus argument. If you've changed so much, is that still the same thing? I understand the argument. I don't agree with it. I personally think just because you tweak 1 or 2 things because of whatever reason, as long as everyone agrees with it, you are playing that game with some minor adjustments for the most part. I mean, if you take away the bag of dice from bolt action, maybe at that point you're not really playing bolt action. But I don't think that's a mechanic most people are removing from that particular game.
Right. Well, it comes down to what Tom was saying. If you're fooling with the core mechanics, the things that are the moving, shooting, initiative, all those things, that's a level of yes, you may not be playing the game anymore. You may be playing bolt action without initiative dice, but that's not bolt action. But at the end of the day, I go, I don't care.
But yeah, that's a good point. Even if you're not, who cares? I mean,
yeah, it's because what do I call it? Do I have to invent a new name, or do I have to say, "Hey, everybody, I play bolt action without initiative dice, or without order dice"? I don't.
They'll never trademark that.
It's one of those. Yeah, exactly. That game will never sell. It's way too long of a name. Like, you know,
and put a one Adventures in Historical Miniatures. Yeah, anyway, that happened because there was already another anything but a one out there. By the way, that's
imagine the amount of proofreading. The amount of proofreading Warlord would have to do to get that title right on the cover of a.
Oh god, yeah,
never
happen. Never happen. Thank you for picking that scab as I just mailed out a copy of Wing Commander to a guy today. It was like, and by the way, there's also a huge errata for Wing Commander. Thanks, Warlord. Thanks.
But, so here's one last thing, and maybe you're going to get to this.
Yeah.
The other issue is portability, right? So, you know, your group, home group, creates this wonderful house rule. Then when you go play with other people, you either indoctrinate them into your weirdness or you revert back to the way that it was written, or heaven forbid you find their weirdness and their house rules, and somewhere it's all of a sudden it's the AL playing the NL, right? And having like, you know, designated hitters and you know.
Yeah, I always joke that anytime you get different groups of 40K players together, you figure out where everyone's house rules came in, because all of a sudden people are like, your unit can't do that. You're like, dude, it's written right here in the rule book. Like, no, but the guy I play against, we never do that, you know. So yeah.
And I think that's one thing. We're talking house rules. If you're playing an organized tournament, there absolutely has to be an agreed upon set. Nobody's talking about messing with like the Flames of War tournament rules. There are tournament rules. Everyone has to have a set that is published somewhere.
But League Pursuit messed with the Blood Red Skies rules for tournaments.
Well, okay,
right,
well, which goes back to 40K. So, but let me make a point, and this is something people have heard me say time and time again. I didn't want to do, but we did. ITC modified the core 40K rules for tournaments, for their 40K tournament scene, to make things more balanced, objective based, whatever. We didn't want to do that initially, and then we realized we had to, just because of the abuse of theater cards in people's lists, and that people were making smash hammer lists that were just dumb. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
So I'm actually, you know, I was going to like stick up for you when this came out. I don't even consider the theater card thing, like the theater card mechanic thing in a tournament. I don't even really consider that a house rule, because to me,
I'm taking away agency from people. I'm keeping them from choosing the theater card.
But it's the same mechanic for the game. It's
You're right.
The same.
The mechanic doesn't change.
The game doesn't change.
The
The mechanic doesn't change. You didn't change the rules on any of the cards. You didn't do anything like that. You didn't change the deployment. You didn't change anything. All you changed was these are the cards you can use. So to me,
the list
that's
building changed.
But that's like not even a house, like stuff like that. And like when you said for a scenario, like, okay, you're playing a scenario. Those aren't really what I would even consider.
ITC changed how objectives work. And so they changed the core.
Yeah, that would be like a
capturing
core
objectives work and things like that. Yeah. So,
but if you
that
showed
was
up,
one that,
if you showed up to play the Blood Red Skies tournament, right, and you read the rule packet, and you read, I have to, which only like 7 people. Yeah, nobody does that. But okay, even better actually. Let's say you didn't read the rules packet. You don't need any explanation of that house rule, right? It's not like you need somebody to explain to you what's going on. It's just like, oh, this is what I'm doing. And I feel like that is a big distinction in the house rule. If somebody needs to like explain it to you for you to be able to play the game, then it's probably a house rule.
How does single engine or single engine fighter, heavy fighter rule work for multi-engine aircraft in Blood Red Skies?
Nobody knows.
No one knows. It's the house rule that we all hate, because people use it and we still don't understand how it all interacts.
So at convention,
in our defense,
no, go ahead.
In our defense, Atomic Mass Games has almost a totally different list of stuff you can play for Marvel Crisis Protocol for their tournaments.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is even unique within gaming to have tournament rules and then regular gameplay rules.
Reading their tournament rules made my head hurt, because it's just every event is so different, and it so changes the core rules, and that's fine because they want a different theme to each one. But going in there, I'm like, wait, is this a whatever timeline tournament or all these other things?
Well, at one of the more recent conventions that I was at, and I'll be very vague because the guy's super nice, but he puts on games, but he house ruled the hell out of the game. So I go playing, like, oh, I love that game. I want to play that game. Wow, we're not playing that game anymore. And sadly, I signed up for another game and realized, oh, he's running that one too. And it was the same thing. So, I mean, that's problematic. I mean, if you're going to change something, and theoretically, a convention would be a great place to introduce a tweak or whatever, but you got to let everybody know what it is.
Absolutely.
You can't get 3 quarters into the game and go, oh, by the way. What?
By the way, you can't do
Yeah,
that. But my whole strategy was based upon that. No, you can't do that. We're not going to do that. Yeah. Well, so one of the things that I want to talk about, and I don't think a lot of people say this, but I have heard it on the interwebs, because once again, when people argue on the interwebs, they have to go nuclear. My favorite last reason for why you shouldn't house rule is, but you are not as smart as the designer. Trust me, I know some game designers, and they're not all smart. They're published. They're not all smart. But I think there's a point there where people try to just shut down the discussion, and they're like, look, this guy designed the game. You're not as smart as them. Just go away. Stop house ruling.
But that's just an appeal to authority.
Thank you.
Like
this is starting to sound very, Lenin-esque. I love this. It's got a lot of politics, but I don't know. I go back and forth.
I just find to me, it's a dismissive way to shut down the argument. And rather than getting to the core of the argument of, hey, why are we house ruling? We didn't agree to this, blah, 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 blah. You're like, but look, dude, you're just not as smart as the designer. So I'm like, okay, you just want to shut down the discussion. So
well bless your heart.
Well, I mean, at that point, you can probably look at why the person doesn't want to play that house rule. Is it legitimate? Is that house rule just not make any sense? Is it changing a core mechanic? Or is it just putting the opposite player at such a disadvantage that the game is no longer fun? And maybe that's the core part of this is, does the house rule enhance enjoyment of the game that you're playing? If so, probably nobody's going to complain. If no, you should explore that.
But I think the problem, and this goes a couple weeks ago to us playing AI, that is really funny. Why are people playing the game? I was playing Connor and against his Necrons to learn specific tactics, and neither he nor Chris could understand why I would concede the game after losing my transport.
Oh no, that's when I showed up and you gave up, and then I started playing him. I did.
After I played it 3 different times, and I was like, okay, I literally can't get the force I need to win the game to that point of the game. So my tactic is flawed. Therefore, I don't want to play the rest of the game. So hey, cool, Connor, let's finish this, reset the game, try something different, and I'll try it again. And I think that gets to the core of people play the game for different reasons. And Connor couldn't grasp. He's like, are you having fun? I'm like, I'm frustrated as hell, but I'm having fun because I am trying different things. And I proved that all 3 of these tactics didn't work agaginst the Necrons.
I thought you were masochist. That's why. Masochist.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to keep losing the same aircraft over and over to the same opponent. Yeah. No, I just proved that I don't like Necrons. That's all right. Okay. We've talked about some of these, so we can probably breeze through them, but I just want to cover some of the case for house rules, the same things people say. We talked about previously the standard Rick Priestley clause, hey, this is your game. Yep. Do with it what you will. And at the end of the day, it is. But I think, like we've said, it's also playing a game with somebody else is a mutually consensual relationship. So you shouldn't go in and change. Yeah, Steve's really creeped out now. We're going to have some 16-player consensual organizations at Adepticon.
So going to be a Me Too.
But the point is,
stop.
People should agree to use these house rules, but you should want to do it because it is your game, and you can make the changes, and no one should feel obligated. But don't use that as a reason to screw your buddy over, right, Matt? Who I changed the rules on like 10 times.
Every time.
But I was in our defense, we were playing an unfinished system. We were beta testing. That isn't house ruling.
But we posed this to the Perry brothers when we interviewed them a couple of years ago. Is there this is going to sound racist. Is there a nationalistic difference? Can English guys sit around in a pub and go, "Oh, mate, good reason, have a shake," and then meanwhile, me and Ray got each other in a headlock in the corner of a room, go the half Nelson. I mean,
you've cut ahead, and I think that is the, I don't know, smoking gun is American culture. And I'm not saying this is a negative American culture thing. This is not me trying to be the capital W. Everyone else in the world is wonderful. But I think there's an American culture difference there. And I think this is going to sound super, super strange to people. I think it is the holdover of a lot of early American puritanical thinking. And literally, there are so many things in our U.S. rule and order that we say, why do we not do them? And we're like, I don't know. I'm just told not to do them. And I go back to the joke about the Puritans that, they don't oppose bear hunting because the pain it causes the bear, but because the pleasure that it gives to the hunter. And in a sense, we act that way a lot about house rules and about the game itself, that we're like, we're not going to change anything and we're going to be miserable playing this game. And I'm pushing my tank park around and by golly, this is the way the designer intended. Instead of going, can we just not be miserable? Can we play with a smaller?
Didn't Dana Carvey used to do a character on Saturday Night Live? He played like a cranky old man. We used to get polio and we liked it.
Exactly. That's about how I feel with some of this, that it's this American way of looking at things where you're absolutely right. The Brits would be like, I don't know, mate, let's change that. Oh, I lost. What do you know?
Yeah, let's go get a beer. Right? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
We couldn't picture the Perry brothers like, you know, fisticuff. Well, like it's going to be kind of an unfair fight maybe, but either way, you know.
You're not supposed to say that when I'm drinking. I started my beer out.
But, you know,
apologies to the Perry brothers.
Yeah.
Clearly, three of us realize that one of the Perry butlers
yes.
is missing an arm, and two of us do not.
Yeah, missing a hand, yes. But I don't know. But I do think you're right. I think we want to have some definitive answer, and the definitive answer theoretically was supposed to be the rules.
Right. And I think for as rebellious and freedom-minded and everything else, kind of like Brett's cat that's crawling outside right now, as Americans are, we do in some ways crave order, and especially in gaming, we crave something predictable, and that if I only understand the rules, if I only understand my forces than the opponents, I will win. And it's partially because we as Americans are so competitive that if I can break this down to its barest elements, I can guarantee I will win. And we get frustrated when something, like Steve alluded to, something comes in and takes away from my perfect understanding of the rules. I have spent years memorizing these rule books.
So that's an interesting dichotomy, because, and this may be like some historical thing that was just made
dichotomy? Up. Did you go to college?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Not a real college, but I went to a college.
A college.
Where, and this may be a historical just made up, but it's something like the Germans said, the Americans have field manuals, but they don't feel any obligation to read them.
Right.
Where I'm that guy. I don't ever read the rules. I wait for you or Aaron or one of my other friends to explain them to me, because I usually fall asleep about halfway through any given rule set. Whereas you will meticulously look over the rules, figure out what they mean, what the intent was behind the rule, and go from there. And that definitely makes you, and a lot of people, better players, whereas I'm just showing up, okay, what are we going to do? Beer, chips, pretzels.
Yeah, well, you still beat the Necrons, and I lost to the Necrons, so that obviously doesn't make me a better player.
I just shot down one. I didn't beat them.
That's a good point.
But we're both showing up for fun for different reasons. You derive some level of pleasure from actually reading the rule book, whereas I just want to look at the pretty pictures inside the rule book, and then paint the pretty toys and have a good time.
Sergeant, I understand that. Would you like some crayons as well, Staff Sergeant?
If you've got them, I like red.
Yeah, no, but you're right that people, the lead up to the game is different for different people. For me, yes, it is breaking out the rules, understanding how it all interacts. Other people, it is painting the miniatures and getting those things ready for game day. And as you and Chris and everybody makes fun of me, I could play all these games with hex and counter and with little pieces of cardboard and be just as happy, because to me, it's the rules interaction. I love miniatures. I love painted miniatures, but that isn't what derives the enjoyment. So naturally, I'm going to be the person that goes, well, what could we do different in the rules? Whereas you guys are like, hey, the rules are a construct that has been handed to me. All the other my enjoyment comes from, look at my Space Wolves that look like Primer Gray. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. They look really, really highly detailed, and have great decals. Sorry, Matt.
I can't even argue that. That's true.
And to me, the fun is the historical research. You know, that's why I really stick with historical games. I paint up my stuff and I read all the books, and then I like to see if it plays out anywhere near what I read about. And sometimes a game allows that to happen, and other times a game can still be fun that doesn't necessarily do that. Well,
that is definitely a whole nother episode we could talk about, Tom. Is the capital H historical game? Do you have to get a historical result for it to be a historical game and for it to be enjoyable? And I think if we use Blood Red Skies as the classic example, hell of a lot of fun. It is a lowercase h historical game because the results as Brett cheats with his great climb card, or Steve cheats with his tight turn card, and the rest of us who didn't choose those airplanes have to follow the rules. Then yeah, it's gives you an historical outcome, but it's a hell of a lot of fun.
That goes back to the old, is this a simulation or is this a game? Right. And I just don't know that many people that really, honest to God, want a simulation. They might say they do, but then you do it and it's like a root canal.
Yeah, I have a lot of games over on that side of the room that are simulations, and they're not fun. Yeah. I mean, I've got them, and I probably will never play them. I'll be honest. I have played them once, and then I've been like, yeah, that was painful.
Yep. If I'm playing a simulation, somebody better be paying me for it.
Well, and Matt saw it when we were playing Red Storm, which I actually really enjoyed that game. But once it scales up, it stops being an air power game. It becomes a simulation of air power on the entire NATO Warsaw Pact front. And that's not fun.
What was the name of the game that we played in Georgetown after the Patuxent River?
The
Clitoral Commander?
Steve remembers.
Yes. Yeah, Littoral Commander. I heard what you said.
You can't say that. You can't say that with a straight face.
It's an undercover name. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Oh.
That was a good game that I think was trying to masquerade as a simulation.
Yeah.
But it was a game.
So, and I've had this discussion with the designer a couple times. That's an interesting game because it's trying to do so many things at so many levels. And it's also trying to be accessible to NCOs in the Marine Corps and have things that people would play it and kind of by osmosis learn some of the concepts, while at the same time being pretty detailed in what it simulates. Yeah. But it was fun. I enjoyed it, even though I lost in the challenge.
Right, and I enjoyed it as well. I mean, we lost. Let's be real.
We lost
to the smart-ass Georgetown geniuses.
Stupid Georgetown students that are smarter than us.
They're going to be my boss one day.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a good thing. That's an example of something like I could not wrap my head around how to house rule that, even though we had the designer right there. I can't think of anything I would change because it's such a, I thought it was pretty tight rules. I didn't get to see all the cards because we only played the one time, but it's not something I would inherently go, okay, let me play with this. Granted, it didn't have miniatures, so it's not something I would want to mess with in the first place.
Yeah, that was your one and only time playing it because it didn't have miniatures. You're like, nothing to push around board, but hexes.
But yeah, it just has pictures.
Yeah, stupid counters with pictures on them.
Do I eat these?
Yeah, exactly.
But whereas, Blood Red Skies or Flames of War or stuff like that, I think just because naturally with Flames of War, I just want to modify the way it looks.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. And it might take a core mechanic to change that. I don't think it does. I don't think, reducing the unit size is really changing anything about the core mechanic. Blood Red Skies, if we're adding missiles to it, again, not really changing the core mechanic or anything like that.
Right.
But I think a lot of miniature games seem to be more, I don't know if it's the number of players or what, but seem to be more conducive to people wanting to house rule stuff.
Right.
I don't think anyone picks up one of your hex and counter games and house rules anything.
Well, people do, but I think it becomes when level of complexity gets to the no fun point, and they either make it simpler or the historical situation isn't covered. So one of the other, in the same general magazine, one of the other articles was about additional orders of battle for some of these games and things, here's the stats for the following different, forces and things. Is that a house rule? In a sense, yes, because they're not in the original game, but you're not changing a mechanic. So all you're doing is reskinning, in a sense, and creating another army.
So is this ultimately like the abusive partner? I only hurt you because I love you. I mean, we only do this to games that we like enough to care.
I think that's the key. Yes. I think part of it is you only end up house ruling games that are a 90% solution for you. and you're like, I like this game so much.
If that one thing,
I just do a little bit. Yeah, because people will say, hey, if you don't like the game, go change. Well, I'm not saying I didn't like the game. I don't want to change because I've played some of the other games. I mean, to me, it's the example of Team Yankee versus 7 Days. I like them for very different reasons. If I was going to play Team Yankee, I would probably tweak a few things. Just like if I went back and played 7 Days again, sorry, Roger, I would make a few tweaks, kind of like we alluded to have things that aren't card driven, have things that are a recurring capability.
I love this game. I just have this 16-page manifesto of things I want to do differently.
I mean,
that's a different one. That's go play a different game.
To Tom's point, isn't that maybe a measure of the game's popularity? If there are a lot of house rules for it. For example, I've found online that there's a bunch of reskinning Star Wars Armada to Battlestar Galactica.
Yep.
I think there's Macross, Gundam. I mean, all sorts of things. You name a spaceship universe, somebody has reskinned Star Wars Armada for that universe.
They thought they saw something they liked and they adapted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you look at systems like Full Thrust and how that's grown over the years, it started out with some very basic rules, and eventually the house rules that everybody said, because I want to model whatever, sci-fi thing, are now in the main rule book. But it's because somebody said the rules you wrote for doing 1970s Star Trek phasers don't cover Babylon 5. And I want to do Babylon 5, so I need to create this new weapon class that's pretty close to your lasers and phasers and other stuff, but we'll call it grazers or whatever. And so you end up with house rules that eventually become canonical, for lack of a better term.
Well, that also leads to stuff like one-page rules. All of their rules are to an extent.
Kind of I
mean, that's the zenith of a house rule. Yeah,
exactly.
Is one-page rules where they have a bunch of free rules for any given miniatures you might have, and you can recreate whatever using some version of whatever kind of base, I guess, core skeleton that they've created.
Yep. Well, guys, we've been running our mouths for almost an hour and a half here. I think we've hit on all the big points. I think we've hit on the pros, the cons, some of the motivations behind. And I gladly pick on my friends that are the rules purists, because I certainly am not. I'm definitely in the camp of I like to go tweak things and change things. But I think we've covered a lot of that. Is there, Tom, is there anything on your end that you really would like to cover house rules wise going?
Yeah, I'm going to wrap it up. I just think I'm not opposed to anything that makes a game simpler. I wouldn't be opposed to anything that made a game necessarily play faster. But, change it like it is anything. I'm not really in it. Change for change's sake is not something I want to do. Find a problem and, again, unilaterally discuss if it is a problem. Again, if it's only a problem because you play the one-armed bandit here, then that's a thing. Yeah. And then, then you can go forward with it. But I appreciate people that want to leave it as it is, but some games need some help.
Yeah. I think Brett needs some help. I'm not sure how we lost it. As I'm watching him crawl around his office here on the feed, this is gonna make a great YouTube video. We're just gonna have clips of Brett. No, I agree. I think, like you said, it's something you have to enter into willingly. And the question is, why are we doing what we're doing? Is it mucking with the big system or not? Matt, anything from you in closing?
I generally love house rules. I think every time we've done it, it's usually because we want to introduce something new. It's not changing the core mechanics, it's just introducing new, whether for BRS that's a new aircraft or a new weapon type or something like that. So I mean, clearly, like, enjoy them. I don't think we've had a bad game whenever we'd introduce something new. We've occasionally stumbled on.
We have, because
that
I've
didn't
lost
work.
a few times with those house rules. So because we lost, it was a bad game. No.
Yeah, but I think it's just a really good discussion, and it's as long as everyone's coming to this table honestly without internet rage.
Yeah,
it's a good thing to talk about.
Who are you people that like house rules? Dirtbags. Well, Brett, now that you're back with us, any closing thoughts on house rules, especially as one of the purveyors of air medals and Iron Crosses, probably the largest Blood Red Skies house rule in existence?
No, I mean, I think the key was house rules are probably going to be fun if they're agreed upon by everybody involved. You just go from there, right? Play your game.
Steve?
Yeah, my way in on house rules is if I read the rule packet, if I'm signing up for stuff at a convention and it says, come play a game of bolt action hosted by so-and-so, I want to show up and play bolt action. But I'll be just as happy if I read the description and it says, come play a game of bolt action that's thematically centered around the invasion of, Battle of Britain using so-and-so's house rules, right?
Yeah.
If I go into it knowing that, totally cool with house rules. If you flip-flop those and you hit me with something I'm not expecting, it's not a good experience.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think my experience like at Fall In was there were plenty of people that made it perfectly clear that, oh, by the way, this is the rule system we're based on, but there's a lot of house rules. And they wouldn't call it out in the description, but they would blatantly say, and there will be house rules to cover a variety of situations. You go, okay, got it. I know I'm not playing this game in its purest form. And I think that's good. Well, all right, guys. Thanks for spending the time with us tonight. I do want to remind everyone to go like and comment on the podcast, share the podcast, tell everybody how terrible we are, and that we're even worse because we hang out with those anything but a one adventures in historical
miniature wargaming. Thank you. Yes. It's always fun to slum over here with you guys and say bad words.
Oh, it's exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the great thing about being on an E-rated podcast, because you say what the fuck you want.
Exactly.
And
we'll go back over to Sesame Street when I record ours.
Yeah, exactly. No, but it's good to have you.
Oh, thanks. It's fun. It's fun. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And as Steve would say, remember to keep climbing for advantage, or something equally worthless for a closing line. But
in this instance, keep climbing for advantage, but only after you roll 2 6s while wearing a purple shirt on Wednesday.
Yeah, I can't beat that closing line right there. Thank you all. We'll talk to you another night on the Lead Pursuit podcast.
Oh, I think he's gone.
We lost Tom.
Tom, come back.
Man down.
We'll get Tom back. I made fun of him and he rage quit. No, we'll get Tom back here in a second. Tom's back. Woohoo.
I didn't take offense to what you said. My computer did.
Exactly. He was like, that guy's a jerk. We don't want to be a part of this podcast.
Asshole. Just bail out. Yeah, but that's...
Exactly. Never liked that guy.
We found the defense for AI. Doug's just going to insult it. It's all going to shut down.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry about that.
Your mother was a cash register.